Good evening, Trump family. Welcome to Open Source News. Have a good night, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, the following is a collection of news from Patriots. Let's get into the news. And it looks like the DOJ is really nervous about this federal judge who has given Trump an opportunity to have a third party look at the things that were taken and give a ruling on it. The DOJ does not want a closer look of their actions and what was taken. And this is why they're fighting so hard to try to get this judge removed from this appeal process, and they're doing whatever they can. So again, the same people who will tell you that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry, apparently DOJ is afraid of what they're trying to hide in the FBI. We know there's a lot of things that they did that were not protocol, we know there's a lot of stuff that they're doing that is politically motivated. And they do not want a third party to have an opportunity look at all of the action taken by the DOJ and the FBI and course the Biden regime, who has single-handedly approved all of this, even though Biden will sit there and say, well, no one to the NUSA that no, we know they did. So let's kind of take a look at what we have here. Just as I mentioned before, DOJ to ask appellate court to block Judge Ali Eileen Cannon's Mar-a-Lago ruling. What are they hiding? Right. What are they hiding? The Justice Department on Friday asked a federal appeals court to block Judge Cannon's ruling that prevented it from reviewing the documents seized from Mar-a-Lago. The district court has entered an unprecedented order enjoining the executive branch use of its own highly classified records in a criminal investigation with direct implications for national security. The Justice Department wrote in its motion on Friday. Well, Judge Cannon on Thursday appointed former FISA Judge Raymond Dear to oversee the review of the documents taken from the DOJ FBI raid. The team, the Trump team, legal team, the Trump legal team, and the AG Merrick Garland, and a corrupt DOJ came to an agreement earlier this week on a potential candidate to serve as a special master. In this case, Judge Raymond Dear was one of the FISA judges who signed a warrant to spy on Carter Page without cause. Raymond Dear, that's Raymond Dear, this dude here. That's the guy anyway. Judge Cannon also approved Judge Dear to oversee the review. Biden scrubbed Justice Department as desperate to stop the special master from reviewing the documents. Obviously they have something to hide. The DOJ on Friday also lashed out at President Trump in his motion, and said the former president has no claim for the return of his documents. NBC reported Department of Justice is asking the Federal Appeals Court to temporarily block a Trump-appointed judge ruling that prevents you, like how they do that Trump-appointed judge ruling anyway, that prevents it from accessing hundreds of pages of classified records. Admit the thousands of pages of government documents taken to the foreign presidents. Justice. The Justice Department on Friday argued that the considerations of claim to return to property or attorney-client executive privilege were categorically inapplicable to the records bearing classification marks. The plaintiff has no claim for the return of these doc records, which belong to the government and were seized, and the court-authorized certs to Justice Department wrote. The Justice Department also argued that the request for the limited stay wouldn't dispute the special master's review of other materials, and would irreparably harm the government by enjoining critical steps of the ongoing criminal investigation, and needlessly compelling disclosure of highly sensitive records, including to deployment of counsel. Despite the issue, an order Friday summoning the parties to the federal district courthouse in Brooklyn, where he is based, for a preliminary conference on Tuesday. The DOJ obviously has a lot to hide. The FBI, Merrick Garland, Christopher Wray, Joe Biden, and everybody else who had a hand in this is hiding something, and they do not want Trump's lawyers to be able to see there's something obviously that they're hiding. They don't want Trump's attorneys to see during discovery, and they're trying to keep that material away from Trump's attorneys. Again, and don't forget still that Trump has the recording of the FBI, and their searches all over the house in Mar-a-Lago, because of the security cameras were rolling. He has tape on what that is, and I'm sure he's holding that as an ace in the hole. So he can release it to the public, but right now is not the time to do it yet. And so we're going to see how this plays out with of course, the corrupt FBI and DOJ, and of course the bottom regime. And Ted Cruz could learn a lesson from his own damn state as the state of Texas once again stands up and fights for everybody else's rights. I mean, could you imagine if it went beyond Texas, and of course, maybe a little bit of Florida? But really, when it comes to these lawsuits, when it comes to challenging big tech in the Biden regime, there is nobody doing as much as Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who hits us once again with a massive win, a legal battle fought in a legal battle won within the domain of free speech online, free speech on tech platforms. It's coming straight out of Texas, folks, and it's one of the biggest stories that nobody is talking about. Folks, we are at a pivotal moment here, an inflection point, so to speak, and if action isn't taken right now to ensure people's First Amendment rights online, to stop the technocratic BS, these tech companies, CEO oligarchy tyrants, if something isn't going to happen soon, well, then it might be too late. Thankfully, the state of Texas is at least doing something, and it's time for others to join in. And of course, let's continue to talk about we're talking about the First Amendment here, folks. Like I always say, it's the First Amendment for a damn reason. It's not the second, it's not the third, it's not the fourth or the fifth. It's number one, because it should be priority number one, so let's talk about it. Of course. Let's roll the tape. Alright, huge First Amendment win for Texas. Ken Paxton and all Americans today in federal court. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and the American people scored a huge victory regarding censorship and banning individuals based on their viewpoints. To Gateway Pundit is also involved in a free speech lawsuit of their own. In Missouri v. Biden, this victory from Attorney General Paxton will certainly help the Gateway Pundit's case moving forward. We have this message right over here from Attorney General Ken Paxton from the state of Texas, or I correct myself, from the great state of Texas. Breaking: I just secured a massive victory for the Constitution and free speech in federal court. Hashtag Big Tech cannot censor the political voices of any Texan. The Fifth Circuit, quote, rejects the idea that corporations have a freewheeling First Amendment right to censor what people say. This is a massive win for free speech. In fact, it might be the biggest yet. Take a look at this decision. In urging such sweeping relief, the platform offers a rather odd inversion of the First Amendment. The amendment, of course, protects every person's right to freedom of speech. The platform is arguably buried somewhere in the person's enumerated right to free speech lies a corporation's enumerated right to muzzle speech. The implications of the platform's arguments are staggering. On the platform's view, email providers, mobile phone companies, and banks could cancel the accounts of anyone who sends an email, makes a phone call, or spends money in support of a disfavored political party, candidates, or business. What's worse, the platform argues that a business can acquire a dominant market position by holding itself as open to everyone as Twitter did in championing itself as the free speech wing of the Free Speech Party, then having cemented itself as the monopolist of the modern public square. Twitter unapologetically argues that it could turn around and ban all pro-LGBT speech for no other reason than its employees want to pick on members of that community. Today, we reject the idea that corporations have freewheeling First Amendment right to censor what people say, because the district court held otherwise. We reverse this injunction and remand for further proceedings. This is one of the biggest legal victories of my entire time on YouTube. Of course, it's still within a smaller federal circuit court, and the whole legal process is still ongoing. But nonetheless, it shows exactly what we've known all along, that what these companies are doing is blatantly unconstitutional. They're playing within this legal gray zone, that they're a platform but also a publisher, and it's just gotten completely out of hand. If there were viable alternatives, it'd be one thing, but we've gotten to a point where places like Facebook and Twitter and YT are really the only options. All tech is interesting, possibly down the line. But right now, these companies are monopolies. They have a monopoly on public discussion and the flow of modern ideas in society. And the idea that these companies can just control speech in whatever manner they please is completely unconstitutional. It's totally authoritarian, and it has some very damaging consequences. The idea from these tech companies is that these trust and safety teams are incredibly important because they save lives, when in reality, that argument is totally flawed. Let's talk about the whole censorship scandal in relation to horse paste. I'm not allowed to say too much here because, again, you have a massive tech company that can enforce their arbitrary, ever-changing rules on speech, and what is allowed speech, but just all of the censorship, and all the misinformation in relation to this one issue based on the peer-reviewed studies that have come out as of recent might have led to not only hundreds of thousands of people losing their lives, but millions, because there was a widespread conspiracy to censor speech, censor scientific discussion in favor of one political side's narrative. It has to stop. These tech companies do not have the right to take away people's First Amendment rights because of my private company, and reform in relation to these laws must happen. And that's why we must be so thankful to the state of Texas and specifically, Ken Paxton, because what's actually very likely to happen in the next couple of years is that one of these lawsuits makes its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And it just goes to show how important Donald Trump's victory in 2016 was. The three scoops that we constantly refer to, because now there's a Supreme Court that actually respects and abides by the Constitution, and is very likely to rule in favor of the people's inalienable rights to freedom of speech and expression. It should be considered a blatant violation of rights. Anytime these big tech companies censor anybody for speech or actions that aren't directly criminal, that should be the baseline. You should have the legal right to say what you want, when you want to say it, as long as you're not breaking the law. And if tech companies want to get rid of you, tech companies want to censor speech, they should be forced to follow very specific legal parameters, rather than just censoring anybody they want willy-nilly, because of their supposedly problematic viewpoints or political talking points. It's absurd. And maybe actually, if you think about it, that'd be a good thing for society, because maybe GG would be more focused on ridding their platform of actual criminals and scammers, terrorists and people who plan on committing horrific crimes. Instead of spending all this time and energy going after people who have political viewpoints that they disagree with on this platform. Right now, there are multiple political topics of debate and discussion that I am literally not allowed to cover or speak of. And if I do, there's a chance that my YT channel gets terminated. And we're talking about basic stuff. We're talking about basic ideas pertaining to scientific study, or analyzing what happened over the last 2 years, or analyzing investigations or allegations, or anything really pertaining to the 2020 election. It's completely off limits. YT doesn't allow you to even talk about it. On what legal basis can they actually enforce rules like that? It seems like a total violation of people's First Amendment rights. And clearly that's exactly what's going on. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And the leftist arguments in this public debate are completely ridiculous, because let's just say all of the online tech censorship was aimed in their direction. Do you think they'd still be using the more private company argument? Absolutely not. They wouldn't. And once again, it's the GOP and specifically the state of Texas fighting for people's rights. And it shows you just how ironic it is. The Democrats keep claiming that Republicans want to come after your rights. Biden tweets suggest that GOP lawmakers are more concerned with robbing women of their constitutional rights than with lowering costs for American families. You know, it's kind of funny because I just read through the entire American Constitution and I couldn't find the word abortion or reproductive rights anywhere. It's completely non-existent. But the literal first couple of sentences, the First Amendment, I see a law that unmistakably and absolutely cements your right to freedom of speech. So the question is, which side is truly fascist? Which side is taking away your rights and which side is fighting for your rights? It's as clear as day, folks. And it's of course the opposite of what Brandon's telling you. A huge victory for the great state of Texas, a huge victory for every American, and the First Amendment. And hopefully this is just the start, just the beginning. Hopefully, this issue, this debate makes its way all the way to the Supreme Court. Hopefully you folks enjoyed this chat this morning. Thank you.